seem fair. No.
You better do a lot of talking. It's fine. They may not be too worried about it.
Is it my comments for two?
Bueno, buenos días, compañeros. Antes que nada, disculpas por este pequeño retraso en el inicio de la rueda de prensa. Como sabéis, vamos a dar comienzo a la rueda de prensa de la película que clausura la sección oficial de este año en el festival. Se trata de Dance First y para presentar la película, como veis, contamos con gran parte de su equipo. Para ir más rápido, sí que podéis hacer preguntas. Voy a hacer ya la presentación del equipo que nos acompaña hoy. Del otro extremo de la mesa hasta aquí están THOSTRUP, productor de la película, Michael Livingstone, productor, Neil Forsyth, guionista, FIONN, actor, Gabriel BYRNE, actor, James MARSH, director de la película, SANDRINE, actriz, AIDAN, GILLEN, actor, y Tilusha Gilani, productora ejecutiva. Abrimos directamente el turno de preguntas. Muchas gracias.
Enhorabuena. Quisiera preguntar al director cómo llega este proyecto a su poder y por qué se decanta por hacer una película y no un documental, como es otra de sus especialidades. Y al señor BYRNE, además del guión, ¿en qué se ha basado cuáles han sido sus principales fuentes de inspiración para elaborar un personaje tan complejo? Muchas gracias.
I think the question was for me, but I didn't understand through the translation, I'm afraid. It's not available at the moment.
Doing translations through this.
Oh, okay. Yeah.
Want this one? Which works?
Oh, it does work.
Bueno, ha habido un problema con la traducción simultánea porque no habíamos explicado bien cómo funcionaban los aparatos. Una consulta solo, ¿en qué número es? En el 3. Ok, it's in the right position. Vale. Perdona, compañera, no sé si puedes volver a formular la pregunta porque no tenían puestos los pinganillos estos, sino...
Sí, quería preguntarte cómo llega el proyecto a tu poder y por qué te decantas por hacer una película y no un documental, que es otra de tus especialidades. Y al actor, a Gabriel BYRNE, además del guión, ¿cuáles han sido sus principales fuentes de inspiración para elaborar este personaje tan complejo? Muchas gracias.
I'll go first. The script was written by Neil Forsyth, who's there. And it came to me during the pandemic, which was an interesting time for a script like this to come to you. And Neil had worked already on a television film about Samuel Beckett. And I expected it to be a sort of conventional biography of Samuel Beckett. And so I read the first page or two, and it felt like it was going to be a conventional biopic of Samuel Beckett. You start in the Nobel Prize. It all felt very sort of predictable. But within a couple of pages, lots of other things had happened that got me very interested in the script. It becomes very subversive early on. I think the other part of your question was, I think if I understood it correctly, was why I didn't make a documentary film when I've made lots of documentary films. Well, this was a great liberation in a way, doing a kind of speculative biography of Samuel Beckett, when you're speculating and using short vignettes of his life, felt like a really good way of making a playful film about Samuel Beckett as well as a film that had some ideas in it. So Neil's writing persuaded me to do it as a feature film, not a documentary.
And I think I understand the second question. I think that Beckett as a character is sometimes portrayed as and he portrayed himself as a kind of a mythical figure, oftentimes dissociated from real emotion, which I think comes from the perception of his work. But if you look at any of those plays, underneath the bleakness and the despair, there's tremendous humanity. And I think that Neil's script was really good in terms of presenting the life of a man who is a myth in a human way with a kind of a surreal touch. Because Beckett approached the world in his work in a surreal way. And I think it would have been a mistake to have done a conventional, born here, did this, did that, died there, kind of predictable biography. So from that point of view, I think it's an original take on what could have been an extremely difficult fictional film to make.
Hola, buenos días. Yo quería preguntar por la decisión estética de la película, del blanco y negro y el color, por qué decidió hacerlo así. Y luego quería preguntar a Gabriel Byrne el tema del desdoblamiento del personaje en pantalla. ¿Cómo fue trabajar frente a sí mismo? O sea, ¿cómo era eso? Gracias.
So I think the first question was to me, why we chose to film the film predominantly in black and white. Well, there were sort of several obvious reasons why. I began to look at photographs of Beckett's situation in the 1930s and 40s in Paris, and went to a photographer called Brashai, who's a Hungarian photographer who worked in France and in Paris in particular, and sort of fell in love with the way he depicted Paris at that time, and felt that this would really work well for the film. And also Beckett, the received imagery of Beckett is a kind of monochrome Beckett, you know, with a cigarette and a profile. To be honest, it was helpful that we shot the film in Budapest and were then able, with black and white, to kind of evoke the period in a certain kind of way. So I think it was the right choice. And then towards the end of the story, it felt like you caught up with sort of film time and you were in a sort of contemporary world, and the film then, you know, changes to color. So I hope that works for the audience, but it was a fairly sort of easy choice for me to make as a filmmaker.
Creo que había una segunda parte de la pregunta para el señor Byrne sobre interpretarse o un personaje doble, ¿no? Sobre cómo gestionó ese personaje doble.
How to portray a double character. Technically, it was difficult because usually when you're doing drama, you're talking to somebody else. But when you're talking to yourself, which I do myself in life anyway, that could be technically challenging. But between James and the rest of the crew, they made it really, really easy, technically. But you still can't get past the fact that you are, in the end, talking to yourself. But sometimes talking to yourself can be the best conversation.
Aquí hay otras preguntas. Primero el chico y luego tú.
Hi, congratulations on the film. I had two questions, one for the director. The first one is about this place where the character of Samuel Beckett goes to talk to himself. Seems like a very idyllical sort of place. What was the inspiration to create that space? Because it was really, really interesting. And also for AIDAN Gillen, I wanted to ask, because I've tried to read the Ulysses book, and I think that your character is very fascinating in real life. How was the process of getting to impersonate him in this movie? Thanks.
Who's going first?
I guess I should go first. So remind me of the question, if you could. It was the English that threw me, not...
Sorry. That idyllical place where the character Samuel Beckett is talking to himself, that space. What was the inspiration to create that?
Well, I can also ask Neil, the writer, to weigh in, because I got a script that said a wasteland. And I think one of the things I thought about was, in French, Beckett talked about lieux vagues, which is sort of vague places, in Waiting for Godot, for example. So I began to think, well, how do I get a place that's somewhere and nowhere at the same time? So I asked my location manager, researcher, to find any unusual places in Budapest that we could consider. And he then had quite a few options and came up with this abandoned quarry that felt very, when we went there, I thought, it feels right. But the idea behind it, I think Neil could answer and speak to.
Yeah, I mean, I think in terms of giving help to a set designer, a wasteland is probably about as hopeless as it gets in terms of...
Yes, it was, actually.
Yeah, telling them what to then do with it. But I think, theoretically, Beckett was never funnier or angrier or more scabrious than when he was talking to himself, you know, whether it was his diaries or short stories or his thinly veiled autobiographical writings. So it was trying to create a device where we could see Beckett turn on himself, question himself, berate himself, and poke fun at himself, I suppose. So it was that was the kind of theoretical take, and then I suppose I just handed the creative reality of that over to James and his team, and I think they did a brilliant job in it. And I think Gabriel's performance was very, very clever and measured in that, and finding the points of difference between the two characters, if you like. So I thought that was brilliantly achieved in the film.
And to answer the part of the question directed to me, yeah, I suppose it can seem like a daunting task sometimes to play real-life characters, particularly ones who are so iconic and literary genius. I had done it a few times myself before, played real people, and I find it quite interesting. You know, a lot of your work is there for you. A lot of your choices are kind of, they've already been made. I wouldn't say it's an impersonation. I don't think Gabriel was too, you know, obsessed about it being a direct impersonation either. Because at the end of the day, you know, I look like this. You know, and as James said, it's not a full, you know, birth to death biopic or whatever. You know, it's chapters of Beckett's life, and one of those chapters, which is a very interesting one, is when he went to work with Joyce. And for me, I guess it was just about trying to get across what that spark might have been, what the influence was. And in a way, you know, I think what Beckett learned from Joyce was to just do it himself, you know, and to do it his way, which they both did, and both changed the landscape of literature. So, you know, it's an honor to get to do it, and I hope it works.
Hay otra pregunta aquí. Sí.
Hi there. I'm gonna get up because it's gonna be hard for you to see me otherwise. For the actors who age through the movie, I would like to know how does the aging of your character affects the way you act? Because I assume you have to change completely what you're doing, your mannerisms and the way you move and speak, depending on the age of the character in the moment, so it's believable.
We also had two actors playing some of the characters, so FIONN starts as the young Beckett and Gabriel inherits the sort of middle-aged Beckett.
Yeah, like I think it affects him too, because you are also different ages throughout the movie. So I guess like your younger version must act and move differently to your older version. And same for you two guys, like the ages do change throughout the movie. Yeah?
Oh, yes, I mean...
Sorry, I feel I'm not explaining myself. Does this make sense?
It's a perfectly clear question. Maybe I'm not the best person to answer it.
I think that something that Gabriel and I tried to establish very early was what mannerisms would be unique to my version of Beckett and his, and then what would carry out throughout both. I think probably the most difficult was the youngest version, the kind of teenage going into early 20s. But there was also a lot of freedom in that because you change so much in that time. I certainly hope I'm not like I am, or like I was when I was that age. But in terms of the process of doing that, I put together a board of any image I could find of Beckett and kind of categorized it into when he's talking, when he's smoking, when he's walking, and things like that. And then we went through that together to kind of establish what would be appropriate for the different versions.
No sé si hay otra pregunta. Bueno, mientras aparecen más preguntas, yo quería hacer una. Hay una cosa que creo que es muy interesante en la película, que es que aunque es la historia de Samuel Beckett, yo creo que hay un trabajo excepcional de escritura de los personajes femeninos, que de alguna forma completan al protagonista, ¿no? Entendemos muchas de las cosas, de los procesos por los que pasa Beckett, tanto como escritor como por persona, a través de las reacciones de las mujeres que le rodean, ¿no? Entonces me gustaría un poco que comentarais sobre esto, tanto el director de la película como el guionista, y me gustaría en especial que Sandrine Bonnaire explicara un poco sobre la concepción de ese personaje, que a mí me ha sorprendido por su complejidad, por sus matices y sobre todo por esta capacidad de conmover desde contándote todas las contradicciones del personaje, ¿no? Entonces me gustaría un poco hablar de estos personajes femeninos que creo que pueden quedar eclipsados por esta presencia tan fuerte del protagonista, pero que creo que están excepcionalmente bien escritos e interpretados.
I would say that's one of the reasons I wanted to make the film. There were strong female characters that were shaping his destiny. It wasn't the great man and his women, it was the women shaping the man. I think Sandrine's character was, in life, was a very crucial part of Beckett's life, working life career. But again, to reiterate, one of the reasons I liked the script so much was because there were strong female characters right from the get-go with his mother. But Neil, of course, was the person who put those together, so he can talk a bit more about that. And Sandrine must also talk about it.
Thank you.
Yeah, I mean, I think he has such a clear view on the world, Beckett, and depending on your subjective point of view, it was either militantly bleak or highly accurate, you know, and I think that you try and work out where that feeling and conviction of what life is comes from, and you look at the key relationships within the person's life, and clearly between Barbara and Suzanne, that's where it came from. I spoke to his biographer who said that very late on in Beckett's life, long after Suzanne's death, he spoke to him, I think when Beckett was in the nursing home, and he brought up Suzanne's name, and Beckett said, the guilt, the guilt. And, you know, and when you hear something like that, it distills the whole relationship and situation for you, I think, as a writer. So it was clearly formative in his, I think, particularly his conclusion of what life is in his later years. And so it was key to make that a key point of the structure of the film, and I think it was just beautifully performed. So, Sandrine, I'd love to hear your thoughts on the character.
Yes, Suzanne is very important for Beckett because she supported him for her whole life. And he was cruel with her because he had a double life. And it was very interesting to play that this woman is she's getting tired and tired by the time because she loves him, and but she was always there for him until the end, until her death. And it's a nice character because she has a lot of dignity, and it was very interesting to play that and to share this love with this this Beckett. Yes, it was interesting, and it was also interesting to act the age until the end and the illness also, and it was wonderful to work with James. He's very subtle, very attentive with the actors, and he takes times with the actors, and which is great. I'm proud to have done this movie. I haven't seen it yet, but for now, I could say I'm proud. Maybe tomorrow I won't say that. I'm joking, I'm sure it's a very good movie.
¿Hay aquí otra pregunta?
Hola otra vez. Yo quería preguntar por el proceso de casting para Samuel Beckett y Samuel Mayor. Es que les veo un parecido físico tremendo. De hecho, les estoy viendo ahora y diría que son padre e hijo. Entonces, ¿cómo les encontró? ¿Cómo encontró especialmente a FIONN? Sí, no sé en quién pensó primero o cómo fue. Gracias.
Yes, of course. It was a real pleasure to cast the film. When I read the script, I immediately thought of Gabriel, and that's just how it was. So I thought, well, if he can do it, then the film can work. If he can't do it, then maybe I won't do the film. So Gabriel and I had a series of kind of conversations about it that were, exploratory and also quite serious about what we were doing and why we were doing it. And then you think, well, obviously there's a different iteration of the character, a younger version. And FIONN I'd seen in a TV show called Normal People, and he plays quite a memorable character in that TV show. And I thought, well, this is great, and he's great. And the other thing is, he looks just like Samuel Beckett in a way that was really helpful, I think, for the film's verisimilitude early on. That the young Beckett is sort of, you fix that very well with FIONN's, not just his appearance, but also his performance. And to connect the two, that was the actor's private dialogue as much as I encouraged it, but that's what good actors do. They want to, talk and share ideas. So to be honest, the two best actors for the roles were the ones I got, and that's, you can't do much better than that. And then I was able to build an ensemble cast with SANDRINE and AIDAN, who I'd worked with before, and Gronia and Leonie there, to build this really, I think, very collaborative ensemble. It was a kind of really nice film to work on. All films are kind of difficult in certain ways, but the collaboration with the actors and the kind of way they work with each other was really special on this one. And my casting was vindicated by the fact that I think everyone was great in the film.
Vamos aquí con una última pregunta.
Sí, bueno, pues la verdad es que la película es un regalo para el espectador, es una película magnífica, tan eficaz como sugestiva, con ese hilo conductor del guión, de las influencias de las mujeres, cada capítulo, la culpa, ¿no? Y a mí me interesaría saber si ese recelo que se presenta en la película de la venganza, ¿no? De que Joyce pueda haberse vengado, no sería el reverso de esa culpa, ¿no? O sea, si esa culpa que sirve como hilo conductor de la película, cuando él dice, bueno, es que es una venganza de Joyce, lo cual no tiene mucho sentido, puesto que el no casarse con la hija que la internara no era culpa suya, ¿no? ¿La venganza sería el reverso de la culpa?
I would say the word shame in English is more accurate than guilt. And I think shame is a very interesting emotion. And obviously it haunts Beckett. And the story of the film is a kind of review of his life through the mistakes he made as he would see them and the relationships that he conducted that didn't go well. I think in Joyce's, so in other words, shame and guilt don't always point to the truth. They point to how you feel about what you've done. And there's a distinction there, I think, that's important in the way we tell the story. So in the case of Lucia, Beckett feels shame, I guess, for the impact he had on her that was negative. But I think, that shame and guilt are things that don't always exist the way that you think they do. In other words, other people may not feel the same way about those things that you do. So it's a kind of uniquely subjective and kind of slightly paralyzing state of mind that leads to kind of inertia to some extent. And you can see that in Beckett's work, I think, that sense of inertia. So I hope that answers the question, which is quite a tricky one to answer.
I think if you were saying specifically, you thought maybe that he had a heightened, exaggerated sense of guilt with Lucia than he should have done. And I think that's kind of the whole point of Beckett, that there was all this tragedy and guilt there, and he wanted it all for himself, you know. That's just part of his makeup. But yeah, again, I think that was a brilliantly realized part of the film.
Bueno, por razones de agenda es un día bastante movido para el equipo de la película. Tenemos que dar por cerrada la rueda de prensa de Dance Fest en este punto. Agradecer al equipo de la película, que tengo aquí a parte importante, pero en primera fila también están las actrices y creo que el director de fotografía, ¿verdad? Y quería que les diéramos un fuerte aplauso y muchísimas felicidades por su película.